warm welcome to this special episode of ETGovernment's Digital Education Leadership Series. My name is Anoop Verma. Today, our guest for this special episode is Mr. Naveen Kumar. He is an IS officer currently serving as Secretary, Department of Irrigation in Uttar Pradesh government. Along with being a senior government officer with wide experience in diverse government departments, Mr. Kumar is also an avid book reader. The books that he likes to read are not confined to any particular genre. They are eclectic, ranging from economics to philosophy, history, self-help, political theory, sociology, anthropology, and even interpretations of mythology. If there is a common thread that binds the books that he likes to read, then it is that these books are not light-hearted. They are very scholarly kind of books, the products of serious research conducted by the world's best minds. The topic of today's conversation is not the work that Mr. Naveen Kumar is doing as an important officer in the fast-growing state of Uttar Pradesh, but on his preference for reading books. Welcome, Mr. Naveen Kumar.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Anup. I'm happy that I could be a part of this one. Yeah.
You recently published in the social media the list of best books that you have read in 2024. The list is very eclectic. It contains books from a diverse range of subjects like economics, philosophy, sociology, politics, in fiction and interpretation of mythology. So, how did you develop such a diverse taste in books?
No, it's very conscious that I have a mix of books because what happens with you is when you try to read books, you go on and it's like one book takes you the other one takes you the other one. It's like that, right? So when you're reading an economic book, you will come across another four books you should read. So sometimes what I do is I pick one or two books from the book which I've read. So if you see today the last year's list, you should have seen I have repeated two authors normally, which I try not to do in the sense which is very important. At the same time, it's also like a binge, right? You also try to you become a fan of the author and then you start reading his books. For example, like Taleb, if you look at his first book is the second book actually. If you read his two books, I am not able to recollect which one is the first one, second one, which is the second one. Fooled by Randomness and Black Swan.
Yes.
But if you look at it, I think the second book is supposed to be the first book. So it should have been read first before the this thing. So there are things which you learn. For example, this year also I had this book called The Revenge of the Tipping Point, which is also my one of my favorite books. I don't think it was there in the list, or I don't know. It must be there in the list because it's one of the most beautiful books which I've read when I was in college. The Tipping Point. If you've seen it,
Yes,
how
yes.
the networks are important, how star connectors are important.
Mm.
So I believe that was 25 years back. So I must have been in college then. So these are very very important. So what happens is that I consciously pick two three genres. For example, economics, psychology, political science, and this year also read a legal book. So which keeps you engaged because I also believe that you must have. Yeah, I think you must have also heard about it. We should engage both sides of your brain, the right hand and the left hand.
Yes, yes.
So I try to do it. I also tried doing a fiction, which normally I don't do. So this time, but the embarrassing point was that I had to read a Tamil fiction in English. So which because the book was very nice and tempting, so I picked it immediately. I'm also trying to improve my Tamil reading, which is my native language. So that's I should do. Yeah, so I make sure that I read a mix of books so that it gives you an like you said eclecticism. I think that's the way forward. You should be I call it as an thought process or an philosophy to work following because unless you do not know the two sides of the story, right, it doesn't help. There are people who will be doing and so there are some books which are like a workbook in case it has to be consumed very slowly. It grows on you. So, for example, there is a very one of my favorite book, all-time favorite book called Atomic Habits, which I think is something. It's a book you read once, and it's also a book you read twice, and it's a constant companion. It's a book which you keep around you, who can keep it for a long time. And there's another book which is called Almanac of Novel Radical. It's almost like a Bible for any entrepreneur who's growing up. So you can pick any page, read about it. So he has a lot of things. So these are things. So I ensure that, back to your question, I ensure that I consciously have an mindset to understand and grow. So, but must will be economics, political science, psychology, and communication and leadership. So these are something which because leadership is something which we assume that we naturally have it, but I always believe that it's a constant work. It's not something you get it over time, because there are people who are charismatic, but even if they are charismatic, like for example, Obama or Kennedy or somebody who are even Indian leaders who are there. So any leader for the matter, you have to constantly work upon yourself so that you are appraised, you know what is happening, and then it's important that way. It's not that that you get everything naturally. So it's like that.
And what kind of outcomes do you expect when you are reading? Some people read purely for entertainment, others read for information, some read for research. So, is there any or others for just for the experience that they get?
No, I would put it this way. I do not. Yeah, it's a good question, because I never thought through why I'm reading. Because I always thought reading is it's an end by itself, right? So you understand things. So let me put it this way. So when you read something, it also helps you to understand, magnify your perspectives. I think that is very important. It's a lens which you get in your own hands, which is very unique, because now, for example, let me explain it this way. See, for example, if you do not understand multiplication, subtraction, and addition, you would not know what to do with the numbers, right? So you have to read a book. I'm putting it in very simplistic sense. You read a book, then it explains you what you can do with numbers, right? So it's something like that. So what you can do with your thoughts, what do you do with your observations, what do you do with what you see around, or what do you do with your situations around. So these are the I probably see it that these stuff, I think the cross coming across the different genres helps you to have that kind of a tool in your hand, which will help you to connect the dots, put light to what you see, or focus you what you want to do, or it can be many things. It's not just one thing. So I would not call it as an entertainment, or the research, or what was the third thing you asked, or for information. It's more of your personality development in many forms. I would put it that way. It's that it's I cannot be putting it into that through three different smaller. It of course is there. It's all three would be there, making a part of what I'm talking about. But I think it's more important that we understand how we place many things. I think it's very beautiful. For example, this I think when you read a book, you will understand why networks are important, why certain networks are not working, why talking, like why audience is very important. In fact, you will see me only talking in very simplistic English, or in a simple English, for one reason, that it's important that you need to communicate with the other person, right? What is the audience looking like? So when I'm talking to a bunch of youngsters, I should speak their language. So that's something which you learn from communication skills or books which will tell you. And I read a nice book on I think Atkins. He's a director who made a lot of BBC series. He says the kind of research which they do before putting one show. In fact, their sentences, in fact, one or two sentences when they do reporting in in the newspaper or in the TV, they get hardly 20-second, 30-second time to tell what is happening on the ground, right? So how can you use that 20-second time to put an effective message across? That's something which we look at. So you keep learning. It's something I see it as a part of your learning, which helps you to learn, unlearn, and relearn. I think that's how it works.
Uh, Sometimes we hear that books can be tools for changing one's life, or at least changing one's mind, or very important issues. So, have you come across that kind of experience where you are doing something and suddenly the book sends you on a different track?
Yeah. I see. I think I would see this is not from this year. I am not. I am trying to recollect if I had some book which had tracked, changed the track. But yeah, there was a very wonderful book which is on CSR, which I read this year, which was talking about the journey of CSR in the country, which is very unique its own way. Because when you look at it, how the CSR itself grew, how now it is growing into a different dimension. I think there's a lot of changes which you look at. But there was a book which I really liked, was which I teach also sometimes in I am I am on this particular topic. Measure what matters. Measure what matters. The book's name is that. I think it's one of the top books for, I think it's also in the collection of Bill Gates. Or I think you've seen that 19 collection. I think it was there in the 19 collection or 2020 collection of Bill Gates. So this book, particular book, when you look at it, it talks about, creating, indicators, key indicators which will tell you how, where you are, what you want to achieve, and then how are you going to achieve. And there is a playbook which is there in the end of the book, where this book particular tool has been used by Google and many people in the world to grow the kind of companies they are right now. So this helps. I think this kind of tool. This particular book was that time I think we were establishing UP Medical Supply Corporation. We had put an Excel sheet, and we are also putting what should be done at what point. And then this has become a permanent style in my life, that wherever I go, when I'm given a lot of tasks, it's easy to put a Excel sheet and find out where you are sitting there in that thing. So it's called objectives and three results. So which means that OKR. So which tells you what is your objective and how do you achieve that. Did you achieve it? And then you go back on a feedback mechanism. So many good books are there. Like, yeah, and say communication. I think it also helps you. I still remember one of the funniest thing I did was, I normally don't tend to talk on a flight. So I sit next to a passenger and I don't talk to them at all, because I think I carry a book. So I keep reading the book. So that's how I spend my 1.5 hours or 2 hours of flight. Okay, the moment they sit, I start reading the book. So incidentally, so I was reading a book which said 99 ways to talk to somebody. So it was so funny. I carry a book. It talks about how do I talk to somebody who's sitting next to me, or it teaches you. And then I'm not literally not practicing it, but I'm reading a book. So I told this particular person, see, I'm reading this particular book, but I'm not even trying to talk to you. So I think it's better talk to you there rather than read this book. So I think this was a short flight between I think I was coming from Vijayawada to Hyderabad. So that's one of those. So we read books, but we might not use it sometimes also. It's also a thing. So the reason I try to do is because it helps you to communicate better. And at the end of the day, I think when I look at it, the biggest achievement I look at it is that I read. You might ask me questions which I would have even forgotten what books I read a couple of years back. But I strongly believe one thing about these things is that something happens to your head, and then you can remember it because suddenly you are talking something and it makes a lot of sense, right? So it's something is there which keeps growing in you all the time. So this has been my particular experience over a period of how many years of book reading. I've been avid book reading from my college times. I've been using there's a public library called Kanivara, which is one of the first four public libraries in the country, and we also had a large British Council library in Chennai. So I've already been a member of it, and then I was also using British Council library in Delhi. So this has been an particularly of big interest. And then one beautiful thing about libraries is that these libraries will have books which you would not see, or not on Amazon, or not in any of the bookshops which you go across. So it's also a beautiful part. You go to a library and see the books which you might not have seen in a payment or Amazon or anything else. So I think that's something which we should. I think going to the library helps you to understand a different perspective to what you do. So that is something which I clearly see.
One thing that I think Chanakya has also said in his Arthashastra, that the government servant needs is wisdom more than the information or knowledge of a particular thing, because wisdom allows him to understand what the evolving needs of the society are and act accordingly. So how important do you think reading of books is for government servant, especially I mean people in senior position like yourself, for gaining new wisdom, for gaining better understanding of the world?
Yeah, so first let me explain the theory of information processing. So you have data, you have information, and then you have knowledge, and on the top of knowledge is wisdom. So if you put a pyramid, that is how your pyramid will look like. So yeah, so you asked me how wisdom is, right? So there was this beautiful book which I was reading about the frugal economy by Navi Raju. He almost has my same name, Navi. So this particular person talks about how different people had come across the world to create frugal innovations, frugal methods, and he took to create a different aspects of the economy, because which is something which is very missing. So if you remember, when I was working in Andhra, I was running this particular agency called MEPMA, Mission for Elimination of Poverty in Municipal Areas, where we had created about 10 crore masks to be given around COVID time. All these masks were produced in the same locality by the women in the municipal areas and rural areas. We created smaller hubs, and we had put extensive supply chain management using a IT tool. So there was a production, there was also there was also a distribution, and all that tracked. That's most important part. It's not something which we gave it away and we had no records of it. We knew which person got what and who made what. So this kind of smaller tools, and I'm not talking about a greater IT tool at all. It's a small dashboard which we created. We were able to do it. So such things, because maybe you're doing a project and suddenly you realize there is an example which somebody has already done it, and then you can from a book you understand how. And one more important point, you must ask me, how is it different from googling that stuff on the internet and a book. The beautiful thing about a book is it also gives you a perspective. It has a start, it has an end, it has an different perspectives, classified and documented in a beautiful way, that it gives you that step by step of thinking. For example, that particular book, Scarcity by Sendil Mullainathan, he talks about his own particular loss of time, and then how he has a focused tunneling problem, how he has a focus thing. So it gives you a step by step. So these guys are some smart books are very good, that it helps you, uh, create that bigger picture which you want to do, and then you understand where you're heading to, because you are heading in a wrong direction, and suddenly there are experiences in the past which have shown that that is not the right direction. So you can, there is also course correction which you can do. It's not always the positive side which we think of. So that way, it's both are very different. Yeah, I would always say you should read a lot of articles also. It's very important. At the same time, book should also be something which I think reading, I would put it this way: reading is more important. Be it you read it on the internet, or you read it on an a docusery, or you read it on an iPad, or you read it on a physical format. But I put it, reading is very important, critical criteria of anybody. I think you go across internet, you Google around, and you find all the top-notch guys do about 20-25 books a year. It's the so, but there are people who can do more than that. I think there are people who can do hundreds also. So, but I think a decent number is 25 a year. So you are there. And what happens is that it also brings in you a lot of humility. That's the most important part. We have this, I think, when I was growing up, my father always tells me this particular, proverb or, saying in Tamil, you say, "Katrathu kaimanavadu." Whatever you have studied is handful, and whatever you do not know is worldful, which is the size of a world. Okay, katrathu kaimanavadu, kalladadu ulagaladu. So what you know is just a handful. What you didn't read or study is full of, it's like it's as big as a world. So that makes a lot of difference. So uh, when you read it, so the most important point is, I would put it this way: for a civil servant, one of the most important thing to bring humility is to read. So when you read, it will bring your wisdom and humility, and I think both are has to be used together.
Okay. You talked about the importance of libraries, going to libraries and seeing new kind of books which are not available online. So, but in a library, the books are categorized in according to their genre. So, economic, there will be economic section, there will be philosophy section, there will be fiction section, sociology section, and other sections. So, when you enter a library, which section are you naturally gravitated to enter first? Will it be
So
philosophy? Will it be economics?
yeah, philosophy has been my long dream. It's also my favorite subject, I think. I always wanted to do a very systematic way of studying philosophy, which I have not done. I think I have a, like you called it, eclecticism. I'm a very eclectic philosopher. I'll pick a Stoic, I'll pick a rationalist, I'll pick a Bertrand Russell. But yeah, one of my favorites when I was doing in British Council was to read a lot of Russell, Bertrand Russell. Yeah, I think there's a huge collection of Bertrand Russell in British Council
He's
libraries.
also written one compendium of world philosophy.
Yeah.
That's
So
very
yeah,
powerful.
so I yeah, so that, so what I do is, yeah, I remember this very clearly when I was in my college. I'll randomly enter a place and then pick a book and then read. So in fact, I remember one of the times I actually booked. I remember this incident very clearly. I went to the children's session and I picked a book how to learn or something. It's a small illustrated book. So they also have a very good children's section in British Council Library. So I went there and sat. So and yeah, sitting in the library also, I sit and read also in the library. It's something which I love doing it. In fact, IIT Kanpur also has a very beautiful library, and I am Ahmedabad. These places I remember. So one of the things which I do is when I even go to a college or school, I try to go to see a library. In fact, I had not mentioned about this in that post in LinkedIn is there used to be a library called Uma Lending Library. I think I clearly remember this time. Uh, and it was a small library in my place where I lived. I think hardly half a kilometer from where I lived. So I think it was hardly a rupee or 50 paise when you borrow a book and then they'll give you a card and then you read. So, and I think it's reading is very important because what happens is that uh, the speed is also very important. So some people ask me, these are questions which I tend to answer. So I do about 40 pages an hour. Okay, so if I'm in the flow, I can even easily do a 50 to 60 pages an hour. So once you are in the speed of doing 50 to 60 pages an hour, it's easy to complete a book within 3 4 hours. So book is about 200 pages or 250 pages, which is normally the trend. But you have big books like there were two big books I read, three or four big books I read this year. So that needs a lot of time. So this particular legal book, which I was talking, I think that's there in the top of the list, which I still remember that guy to write that particular one para, he should have at least read 20 30 pages of judgment. So imagine one if somebody is writing a book of 500 pages, and that particular person must have at least read 10 times or 20 times that number of to write that particular small paragraph because he's talking about a judgment. For example, this particular book talks about how the Supreme Court has over a period of time evolved itself as what into what it is right now. So for everything he has to read a judgment. In fact, there are Supreme Court judgments which runs into 700 pages or 800 pages. So if you're quoting at least 1,000 judgment in the book, so you should have read. I'm just putting a small number. It could be 100x also. I'm just guessing it, right? So that's
Yes.
how. So it's an art. Also, one of the things which I'm not doing, I think, which I should quickly pick because I have this thing that the reason I don't write notes is I depend on my memory to hold my thing because the notes is something which you cannot carry all the time, and how many notes you create and notes after note it's goes. So I try to train my memory to hold it to the way it is. So if you, I think a couple of years back, I used to read how memory works also, so that you become a master of it. So I do this revision, I'll read about it, I'll discuss about it, again come and read a review of it. And then once you read a review, you will remember some portions of the book, then try to do it. So, and some people ask me, have you revisited reading a book? I haven't. There are very few books which I have reread again and again, which is one of the books which I reread again and again was that Measure What Matters because I teach, so I have to be good in what I going to tell people. So otherwise, I have this thing. Even if you pick an idea or two from a book, that is enough. I think that's exactly. I think it's not my own quotes. I'm quoting from the founder of Netflix. I think he talks about a particular book, which is also in this list being an entrepreneur. I think it's So he talks about the first 86 pages of that particular book. If you see, there's a popular reel which goes around talking
Yes.
about first 86 pages. He reread again and again and again and again. So I think that if you can pick a couple of ideas from each book, your perspective will grow. That's exactly how. See, for example, history books. I've been reading history book every year. So every single time I read, so I keep, it grows on you. It's simply the mention which I made, it puts a light on your what you see. You are seeing something and it brightens the light so that you see it better. So that's exactly how it works.
Now, one of the issues in philosophy, history that you have talked about is that the arguments never end. The philosophical arguments are going on for the last 2000 years and there is no end. So everyone gets refuted at some point of time. In history also that. So are you involved in the argumentation also? Like arguments and counter
I
arguments.
see. I would not call it an argumentation. I call it. I use this word. I don't know whether if you have read about this dialectics. There is a
Dialectics, yes.
thesis, there is a
Antithesis.
antithesis, and there is a synthesis, right? So that
Detailing.
way, it's your it's between yourself. I remember. I'll give you the best example which I had experienced personally. I visited Hampi sometime back in 2020, March 2020. So I must have read at least 3 4 books before landing there, because that's exactly how you experience um, better, right? It's not just you see walking around, see the monuments, or somebody tells you. So there was this guide who was with me. He was one of those senior most guides, which one of my friend had arranged, and he had enormous knowledge of the place, enormous knowledge of the place. So I remember him saying this one. He says, "Sir, I've been here in this particular thing for last 16 years. The thing which I used to tell as an podium, now I call it as a dancing stage. So over a period of 16 years, my own perspective of static buildings which are already standing there and doing something, or it's been there forever, right? The perspectives of them changes,
Yes.
what they were used. So if buildings can, static buildings can change, the perspectives about them can change. I think ideas are something which keeps changing, right? Like you say that Hegel talked about ideas and Marx, inverted them, and then you had Bauer coming and inverted. So it's all about ideas which we talk about. So that's why I picked this thing that I do not own a particular line of thought. I own an I own a particular group of thoughts. I say eclectic thoughts, because this could be better in this perspective, but this could not be better in this perspective, but this could be. So that way you become very eclectic in your, it is good for even psychology also. The most important thing which I love about this is the tendency to be refuted is very important. I think that's exactly how our human brain should be also. You must have heard of it. We have two brains. One is the
Yes.
amygdala, which is the lizard's brain or the mammal's brain, and then you have a neocortex posted on above it. So, and right now, I think we haven't spoken about a particular book called Thousand Brains, where he talks about it's not just only amygdala is giving your, function, because both have to function. It's amygdala and the neocortex functions, together. That's when even in a flight fright, earlier people used to say it's just the flight fright, which is amygdala, which is responding, but it's everything else, right? So I would call it that way. So it's important that you grow. And there's been a lot of research which has come in cognitive science to understand how we think and do things. So that's the better way of putting it.
Yes. You mentioned A Thousand Brains which is by Jeff Hawkins, a best-selling book. It's an analysis of the human brain, and it postulates the building of self-learning super-intelligent systems. Now, you have done a lot of work in the IT departments, and you are very much exposed, and you have been talking about AI and other technologies. So, what is your view of the possible cooperation or conflict between AI and human intelligence? How is this going to unfold in the next,
Yeah,
let's say,
so
5 years?
he talks about. Say, I remember. Yeah, let me take me back to my college days where I was tutored or studied. We had a subject called neural networks. It's one of my elective options. So that is the probably the mother science or mother subject for an artificial intelligence. Yeah. We have been reading about it for the last 25 years. And then what you see recently is something in an advanced form. So I remember I had never had an anxiety when we were studying. These are the same questions which we heard 25 years back. And now it is already there. So it's there. So I will give you two different perspectives to look at. One is I always talk about it being brought up in Chennai, growing in Chennai, where we had the internet coming to India through Chennai. This is about my 90s, where we had one 20 kbps connections, okay, in Chennai, which would give you good network, and we had access to a lot of things. So when the internet was coming to this country, there was a lot of talk that internet will take over, a lot of bad things would happen, this would happen, that would happen. I think you could easily relate with me. That's a similar talk which we experienced around that time.
Yes.
And right now, sitting what 30 years from then, exactly 30 years from then, it's 1994. We are sitting in 2024. So you see, nothing much has happened. So I think it's humanity has always been an I would give this credit to humanity for one reason, that it has always been an what you call a very benevolent system. I have never seen it going bad actually. If you see, look at the history, there is this author who talks about factfulness, that how we have evolved into better people, better things, everything, a better economy, better societies. So that is something which I put as a first what we call perspective. I think that would be better. So the second is when you talk about artificial general intelligence, which is called the AJ, which is growing. One of the things which I learned from that particular book is that 2016 was the time where breakthrough in brain research has happened. That's exactly where many things have happened. So one of the missing thing is we always think artificial intelligence is all about computing, and getting see, we also try to use chat gpt as a google kind of thing, right? So,
Yes.
or we try to use it as, so it's beyond google. So I think we have to understand what artificial intelligence is all about. I think there was an I don't know whether it was a harvard professor or mit professor who was talking about it. So first of all, we have to understand what we want from that. That's the first perspective. And then we also have to do our policy making, all that thing around it to protect how we can do things about. So these are first two things which we should look at. And third, I would put it this way, that can we not make it better? So can we? So there has to be an some kind of I think collaboration. I would put it that way. That collaboration there, we can think of a group of people coming in, to remove all those biases which we think that there are in human thing, right? So that is something which. So this way you will make what we are creating into better thing. I think that's something which we can. I'm always looking at the optimistic side of the technology. There is, I think we have enough movies to tell you how it can go bad and how things can go bad. We laugh at it, but look at this thing, right? I was see, the medical industry can completely change with artificial intelligence and robotics going together. Imagine robotics.ai could do a beautiful surgery for 12 hours, 13 hours, right? So this is the kind of things which we look at. I think sooner or later we will see some artificial intelligence doing a robotic surgery, and so guided by people. So these are assets which we should have it. I think it's in the interest of society. I would see society as a first thing. That is will benefit. So I don't think that it's bad. So everything comes by and it evolves. I think the way internet has evolved, it's a testament to what we look at in the future. So
Yes.
I don't think bad things would happen. So we already have a testament of.
I think the movie industry is also responsible for some of the bad impression that AI is casting. Terminator came
Yeah,
about the same
it's
time, about 30 years ago. First Terminator movie.
yeah. So I have a friend who told me that now the entire movie can be shot in AI. So imagine, that's a beautiful
Yes.
thing, right? So you write the sequence, you give the dialogue, it'll
Mm.
create the scene and it'll bring back. But even then, I think I don't think we can completely replace the human beauty. I think that's something. See, age just what, 100 years old, 50 years old. We are millions of years. We have evolved. So it takes time. So there'll always be this gap. I think it's just my own understanding or perspective that there'll always be this gap that they cannot completely replace a human being. It's they will come to some part of it. They can be good at something. We could be good at something, and it's two ways. I think it's a symbiotic thing which you should explore what best we can get out of.
Yes. You have also mentioned in your list Anand Neelkantan's The Asura Way, which postulates a contrarian way of thinking, of doing things that might have a better chance of leading to success. Now, in government, when you are working in government, the projects are massive. And here, if we start applying contrarian way, then the project will get indefinitely delayed because I mean the scale of project thousands of crores and it can impact the lives of
I,
millions of people.
yeah.
How
So
to reconcile this contrary way
yeah,
of thinking with government work?
yeah. Let me come back to the book itself. So if you look at it, see this guy tried to bring an Asura way of doing an MBA thing. This book is particularly written for an MBA.
Mm.
And if you read the book, he has given some very good, beautiful examples how certain things can, grow into what they want, to be what. So I think you spoke about Chanakya. I think there's also a story of Chanakya in the book. I think that's something which has sat in my head for some time. So how Chanakya was brought in and then he was humiliated. And then the idea of he was so furious he wanted to take a revenge, immediately. But there was this powerful king, he cannot do a revenge immediately. So there was this lady who met him. Okay, so that's a story. That lady who was an Asura actually. Okay, who is not educated like Chanakya, who is not an Vedist or who has studied Vedas. But this particular, she said, "Why are you anger? Why are you in anger? Why don't you channelize your anger into something?" Right. So when you channelize your anger into something, can you not learn from Can you do it better? So then the great Chanakya knew that okay, my anger is not the solution. My anger channelizing into something is a solution. So the point the book talks about is how do you channelize your energies? So can you not see that I have an anger that the project is not completed, but shouting at people will not get me a work done, right? So what I can do is I can channelize that energy into something which I could, streamline things. What is that gap which I look at? Although it looks like an MBA coursework, but it's something. So similarly, is that for a normal person, I would not say this way. They also talks about the other Asura king who would probably live in present instead of going back into yuga after yuga. But he enjoys being himself, living in the present. So sometimes we have to think of projects which would deliver a good now. So and yeah, so there are many examples in that book. So I would see it as an probably the first experiment. I think that book is an experiment. That's the reason I read two books of his this year, and he's also a friend of mine. So the reason being is that he is trying to give you a different perspective to what you think. I think when we spoke about it, he also gives you an antithesis. Like there's a thesis there, and there's an see when you are talking about, for example, anger itself. I mean, that's the point he was trying to make. People will tell you, no, you should not get angry. This book says, okay, it's okay to be angry, but you channelize your anger. So that's exactly a perspective which you are bringing about. So that's exactly that the book is about. So you also open up a mind to a different thought process, which is very different from what you have been told, what you are asked, or what you do it. So this is, I think, very decent way of looking at it, right? So there are many things. So that's what I always believe that our esoteric wisdom, I think the wisdom, kind of wisdom which the country holds, the people of the country hold, is so deep that you cannot, create one single model and explain it. right? So you say anger is bad, somebody says anger is good. So you need different models, right? So you ready to open to understand these models? Let us not go to the second stage. Let us stay in the first stage to see whether we accept that there could be an opposite perspective or different perspective. So that is something which the book is all about.
No, one of the issues that has surfacing now is that people are too much obsessed with social media, and that is why they are unable to read the large scholarly kind of books. Because if you look at the young generation, they probably read, I mean, 1,000 to 2,000 words per day, but that would be on Facebook, Twitter, and they are constantly browsing and emails. So when you are already reading 2,000 words on social media, then you might not have the energy to read scholarly kind of books. So what would be your message to the younger generation regarding book habits? Should they cut down on their social media consumption and focus more on books?
Yeah, see, if you look at every mobile device which is created now as an screen time,
Hmm.
you also would see Android as something called digital well-being. So it's already there in your mobile, which is telling that you spend a lot of time on your mobile. It's not a good thing. It's already there. So that is first thing. That's the first thing which I wanted to. The second thing would be that when I also mentioning it, when you read a book, it gives you, say for example, reading a news, reading an information is different from reading an scholarly, because presents that entire same idea, classified into an different kind of knowledge and perspective. So I think that is something which people should look at. I think you should. I don't think. See, I think Bangalore has a nice reading club around Cuban Park. Every Sunday they come and read, but it could be mostly fiction also. It's not just. And you also see that I don't think, but the way of consumption is very different. There's a lot of podcast which is happening now. That's also a way of. So I don't say reading is the only way of growing. So podcast could be very decent. Even the same books which I read are there on podcast, or they are on audiobooks.
Yes.
I think a lot
Audible
of
is very popular actually.
yeah. So I have a friend who travels about 3 hours a day, who downloads an audiobook, goes, hears it all the way, hears it all the way back. So there are different methods to it. It's not just I would say reading is not just the solution, but there are other ways. But yeah, I also read a book called Hooked a couple of years back. I think 1 or 2 years back. It talks about how the social media is entirely built on how to keep you hooked, the algorithms of social media. So I think people should try and practice digital detox to it's important right now. I think that's something. I have an intern who talks about how he is addicted to mobile. So it's important that you have to have your own mechanisms. So I also have this tendency to keep my phone away for an hour or two on in normal day, so that you lose that digital anxiety also. I think it also gives you some kind of anxiety. So it's all around. It's not just your even say books, even watching or consuming a lot of Netflix also can be bad, or that way. So it or be good. You'll understand there are people who see docuseries after docuseries. So everything has its plus point and minus points. I think we have to somewhere balance it out, and we also have to use technologies. I think that's something we cannot always think rely on the older formats, because some people cannot afford reading a book, buying a physical book. They could easily read it online or a PDF book. So I think this year I did two PDF books. So I would probably not. Uh, I just got a download, and then you read it online when you're traveling. So this helps. So so it's about how you're learning. I think that's the key, and reading could be a part of it, your listening could be a part of it, or hearing could be a part of it. I think the most important part which we should see is that you should keep learning. That's important.
Yes. Now, you told me that you have the target of reading about 25 books a year. So that means last few years, you must have read hundreds of books. So it would be very difficult for you to select five books that have influenced you most in your lifetime. But I will still ask that question. Can you please name five books that
Yeah,
are
so
most
yeah,
important?
put them in genre. I think self-development, I'll put Atomic Habits as one book which you should have it in your library. I think it's a very beautiful book. I still follow this particular person. I think he also writes a Thursday newsletter every week. And he is a very popular Instagram also, James Clear. So you should, I think that's something which we should know. The second book, I think this is the book I forgot. I think this should have been the first book, which is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kin. I
Yes,
think
yes,
I have not seen such a phenomenal book. He's a Nobel laureate by themselves,
yes.
and I've never seen any, I've not seen a book which is never quoted in any other book. I
Mm.
think if you look at the number of citations this particular book would have in other books would be phenomenal. I don't think I have not come across something like this in my last 10 years of reading. So this is something, this is a must read book. You can read the book slow, you can read the book fast also.
Yes,
That's
I have
so you
that
can
book
do
actually.
it. You can do it both ways. And third book, I think I'm a guy who likes history. I think its name is Noboru Karashima. Yeah, Noboru Karashima is a Japanese author. He has phenomenally written about Tamil history. I think I say for one of the reasons I like this guy is we also have a lot of Japanese who follow Tamil culture and other things. So there's nice written a nice book which I think is very probably the most neutral book which you'll get on Tamil culture because there are always been this issue of biasness from both sides. I think that's something this book is trying to create a balanced view of looking at Tamil culture. So I think it's a must read for many people, which will give you a very different perspective of what Tamil culture is also like. So you asked me about fourth to be on. I think Measure What Matters. It's a book which you should read. It's a book for all corporates, any administrator or anybody who should. Because one of the things which we don't do is that we do not understand what is that thing which we want to do or how did we do what we want to achieve. So unless you measure it, so you will not know what is. So I think this is something which I would advise. One of the most beautiful, I think, should I pick it from this year or from previous years?
Yeah, previously also.
Yeah. So I believe since most of your viewers would be guys who want to help themselves or grow themselves. I think there's a very beautiful book which is called Build. I think by Tony somebody I forgot his full name, who was the one who created the all the iPods and first three generations of iPhones. So I would this book is particularly for me. It's a micro MBA. It gives you it's a micro MBA book. It talks about different parts of the entire MBA line, and it talks about product management. I think that's something which is going to come big way in every field of business management. Where I am also creating a product. If you look at it, if I'm working on a particular project, it's not just the project which we talk about, which I'm also creating something in the end of the day, which means I need a it starts from even writing that manual for the product how they do it. So it's something which any manager, I think that's for a good manager, I think this particular book would be nice. So I think this would help. Yeah, 5 books of this. I think it's a must do. My favorite ones.
So, do you also feel inspired to express your own ideas in books and write something maybe?
Yeah, it's
If you
always
were to
been there
write,
on my
what
mind.
would be the
So I
genre
always
that
tell
you?
people that it's this is coming in my autobiography. Let's see, then I do it.
Okay.
Because I do not right now I do not have that sense of achieve something great. So I think when the moment I feel that I've done something enough to write one, so I think I should. But I also believe I think one of the biggest inspiration is Mr. Obama himself. For one reason, he wrote an autobiography at age of 32, even before he became a president of America. So that's something which we should look at. I think, in fact, I remember one of the and it also comes with a lot of experience. It's not that he simply wrote a book. One of my favorite quote from the book is that if you are very insecure, you tend to be very self-reliant. So this is some one idea which I took. I think this I read it in 2012, long back. but that idea stays with you. When you see somebody is self-reliant, you know that he's been through a lot of insecurity, so that he grows himself into a very self-reliant person. And this guy wrote it in his autobiography way back, even before he became the president, right? So that's exactly, so these things, I think autobiography is important. I think journaling is also important. I think it's high time we have to write our own stories. That's what I write about my LinkedIn. If you look at it, my posts are little autobiographical in nature. And in fact, I was talking about my visit to MV Dulas, which is one of the floating libraries or the floating bookshop of the world. I think maybe they had dismantled it sometime back. So when it used to come to Chennai port, we would go dressed up and going to a shop to that's I was hardly a small boy then, so I go and buy books, 5, 6 books we were to get. It used to be there in my shelf. So these are stories which you like going to Kanimara Library. This particular interview is itself is autobiographical in nature. So I think it's not about just book forms. I think we have other formats to put things in perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Naveen Kumar, for a very erudite conversation and your insights on the books, the value of reading books.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Anuj.